Once upon a time, he was former President Jacob Zuma's so-called super spy, heading up a secretive subsection of the state security agency, all in the name of only protecting number one, Umsholozi. But this week, the NPA's no-holds-barred IDAC unit arrested and charged Thulani Dlomo for alleged forgery, looting the agency of millions. And our investigations editor, Pieter du Toit, thinks it's among our best early Christmas presents this 2025.
Can I emphasize to you on this dreary day in Johannesburg, where we haven't seen sun for what feels like months, that the arrest of Thulani Dlomo by IDAC, in my mind, the most significant arrest of the year, because it shows that the securocrats and the spies that were so key to maintaining the Zuma power structure is now being picked up, hopefully one by one.
Finally, later in the show, the mother city suffered a fairly serious earthquake in the early 1800s, with On This Day in South African History heard at the end of the show.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcast channels.
A very special thanks to 10X Investments for sponsoring The Lead over the past month or so. My name's Graeme, this is The Lead, and this is the South African story. This episode of The Lead is brought to you by 10X Investments. 10X, your future. Pieter du Toit, welcome to The Lead today.
Graeme, good seeing you in Joburg.
It's been lekker, although the weather's been like a bit up and down. So
no, it's terrible. We want summer. We want a blazing hot summer, which we haven't yet gotten. So here's hoping for a better December than November.
Let's start here, Pieter. On Monday, we learned the news that the NPA is investigating Directorate against corruption. In fact, arrested the former head of the state security agency's counterintelligence structures, Thulani Dlomo, as well as this project manager, Patrick Umsholozi, on charges of theft and fraud to the tune of like 12 million bucks. Both are now out on bail of 20K each. But Dlomo's a key figure from the Zuma administration's years. He headed the unaccountable Chief Directorate of Special Operations, right, which basically was Zuma's special little spy agency.
Yeah. Graeme, as I tried to transmit and communicate to our reading public that the arrest of Thulani Dlomo last week, his appearance in court, the way in which IDAC, which is the National Prosecuting Authority's investigating directorate, went about this case, I don't think we can understate it enough. Thulani Dlomo was absolutely key and central to the way in which the state security agency was weaponized and repurposed under the Zuma administration between 2009 and 2018 to make sure that Zuma retains absolute control of the intelligence structures in this country. Intelligence structures like we're seeing with the Madlanga Commission and the Ad Hoc Committee into Police Corruption, crime intelligence, SSA, all the institutions in this country that deal with intelligence is key to ANC factional battles, and it was key for Jacob Zuma to retain control of party and state. And Thulani Dlomo was absolutely central to that project. You remember in 2014 when Jacques Poe first wrote about what was happening in the SSA, which led to the decapitation of SARS later on, which led to him writing the book, The President's Keepers. Thulani Dlomo was a central figure in that. Now, the fact that IDAC, that the NPA, have been able to make the investigation so that it reaches a point where they can arrest Dlomo is massive. I know everyone's frustrated with the NPA. Everyone's frustrated with the lack of prosecutions and the lack of senior state capture figures being put in orange overalls. But Thulani Dlomo is a central figure, and I think we need to appreciate that and take a moment to consider what the gravity of this means.
Can we look at the IDAC charge sheet specifically? Yes. So it's just quite a peculiar case because it's not something you sort of see every day. They forged, allegedly, this document on behalf of a company that had no knowledge of it, creating an image of this is all legit. This is how we're going to basically get 12 million bucks out of the SSA.
So I saw you earlier and you said, you referred to 12 million. 12 million bucks in nothing. Our context is bugger all. I mean, it's nothing. If you consider how many billions of rand have been siphoned off away from the state. When we write about corruption at News 24 and our sister publications elsewhere, $12 million is nothing. Now, this was a pretty easy scheme. They extracted 12 million rand, which we know of, out of the SSA's coffers. They used allegedly fraudulent invoices and purchase orders to extract that money, saying that they've contracted this company to provide X number of services for SSA. The services weren't delivered, weren't procured, weren't delivered, and that's how they're nailing them. So the point I want to make is the mechanics of this is less important than the fact that they were able to nail both of them on something. Now, let's just take a step back. Thulani Dlomo was head of the Chief Directorate of Special Operations in the State Security Agency. In that capacity, he had the ability to launch a number of clandestine operations, and he could draw on the resources of the SSA. Now, because of the nature of intelligence work, whether it's at SSA or crime intelligence, the oversight and accountability mechanisms that are used to make sure that SSA or crime intelligence, for that matter, doesn't go rogue, you rely on legislation that gives us the Inspector General of Intelligence. There's a committee in Parliament that does all its work in secret, that's supposed to provide oversight, and you've got the Auditor General. In this secretive environment, Dlomo and Arthur Fraser, who was the Director General at SSA, and for that matter, David Motlobo, who was the Minister of Intelligence at the time, or
who's still
Minister
a deputy.
of SSA, who's still a Deputy Minister, they could do pretty much whatever they wanted. And as we saw in 2018, President Cyril Ramaphosa asked Sidi Mufamadi to lead a high-level panel to look at the SSA. We saw testimony delivered before the Zondo Commission into state capture. And what we heard there was that the unit that Dlomo was heading, the section that Dlomo was heading, which reported to Arthur Fraser, who was the Director General, they did whatever they wanted to do. They had access to millions and millions and millions of rand. They reported almost directly or beholden to the president. In fact, there was testimony delivered before Zondo that said these agents swore a personal oath of allegiance to the president, which is ludicrous in a constitutional democracy such as ours. So the way in which our intelligence structures are set up, the way in which they function, the opaque nature in which they are able to access resources and funds, meant that they were able to launch operations like Operation Mayibuye, which was specifically designed to protect Jacob Zuma and destabilize anyone who stood in opposition to him, including the judiciary. So they launched operations against the judiciary and including operations against the media, of which the Sunday Times stories about the so-called rogue unit is the perfect example. So
they were also checking Zuma's food for poisons.
And making sure that his car is safe. And it was his Praetorian Guard. It was his personal spies, and Dlomo was sitting at the top of that. So again, Graeme, can I emphasize to you on this dreary day in Johannesburg where we haven't seen sun for what feels like months, that the arrest of Thulani Dlomo by IDAC, I think, is, in my mind, the most significant arrest of the year, because it shows that the securocrats and the spies that were so key to maintaining the Zuma power structure is now being picked up, hopefully one by one.
Yeah, also good news that we've seen this week that, of course, there's positive signs of economic growth. We've heard various reportings from our business team that it looks like we're turning the so-called corner, and even some top senior business leaders within the country are going, hey, we're on the great trajectory at the moment.
Which is a good thing, and it's great to hear.
Yeah, but we need that accountability. But I would also argue that we also need the convictions, right? And these IDAC cases take long.
We do. Look, you're right, and News 24 did report this week on these green shoots, and that's wonderful to see. There's more fixed gross capital investment, which means government is investing in infrastructure, and the private sector is also investing in big capital projects. We saw that our agricultural exports increased year on year by 10%. So there are a lot of positives that we are seeing happening in the country. But this will count for naught, Graeme, if we don't fix the criminal justice system. we are being treated, treated is probably the wrong adjective here. We are seeing the depravity and the dysfunction in the criminal justice system every single day when we look at the Madlanga Commission or when you follow the ad hoc committee into police corruption. Now that's why this arrest of Dlomo is so important, because it shows us that there are certain sections of the criminal justice system that seems to be functional, that are functional, and you've got highly skilled and committed prosecutors and investigators putting together these highly complicated cases. Now, let me tell you, Thulani Dlomo is a foreign-trained South African spy. This guy can, and from what I've been told by people in that environment, this guy can disappear at the drop of a hat. He has access to resources in the form of money, in the form of arms, in the form of networks of spies. So for IDAC to be able to get hold of him, to arrest him like they did, and from what I understand, it was quite an operation to
they were arrested on the Sunday, right?
They were arrested on the Sunday, appeared on Monday. So it was quite the operation, which shows you that IDAC is deeply committed to make sure that we see accountability and that some of these actors are arrested. Now, that's one part of it, but they need to kick on. The Zondo Commission report, the final report, recommended 3 prosecutions out of the intelligence fracas or the malaise under Zuma. 1 was Thulani Dlomo, 2 was Arthur Fraser, who was the Director General of the SSA, and 3 is David Mahlobo, who you mentioned earlier, who is still a Deputy Minister. So the arrest of Dlomo should by rights be the first one, I think, of a couple in this environment. But it's a positive thing that IDAC has been able to arrest a person of Dlomo's influence, someone as contentious as him, and quite frankly, someone as dangerous as Dlomo.
But Arthur Fraser, on that point, has obviously been a bit of a thorn in the side of President Cyril Ramaphosa.
He's been a pen during in his foot.
Yeah, and of course, Phala has done no favors for President Cyril Ramaphosa. So, do you think that IDAC could potentially bring a case against those two players?
If you look at the charge sheet and the accompanying prosecution notes attached to the charge sheet that was lodged at the Commercial Crimes Court in Pretoria on Monday, shows exactly how the scheme worked. Now, they are nailing these guys on theft, on fraud, on uttering, and there's a 4th charge which escapes me now. But it shows how money was extracted in cash. Now, remember, because of the forgery, they forged invoices and they forged purchase orders. So it shows how the scheme worked. It shows how they withdrew cash because of the nature of undercover work. You only work in cash. But millions and millions of rand were extracted. Now, the Zondo Commission heard that a lot of the money that was extracted under Operation Maibuye, run by Dlomo, approved by Fraser, with the knowledge of Mahlobo, much of that cash was handed to Zuma. Now, that's what the Zondo Commission heard. It's going to be very difficult because of the fact that they deal in cash to prove that money was indeed handed to Zuma, because there are no EFTs to follow or digital footprints to trace. It's almost impossible. But it shows that money was withdrawn. There were signatures attached and approvals made and motivations sent with these individuals' name on. So if Zondo is any guide, and if I were David Mahlobo and Arthur Fraser, I'd be semi-uncomfortable. Although if I describe Thulani Dlomo as dangerous, Arthur Fraser might be even more dangerous.
Sure.
He's the guy that you mentioned earlier. He's the guy that waltzed into the Rosebank police station a couple of years ago and blew the lid off Phala because he knew that. He knew that if anyone knows where the skeletons are buried, it's Arthur Fraser. We can merely speculate about the reasons why Mahlobo is still in a deputy minister under President Cyril Ramaphosa. He also knows a hell of a lot.
There's 6 names being put forward to possibly lead the NPA next. Of course, one of them is Andrea Johnson with IDAC.
Yeah.
Would it be a loss for her to head up the NPA and then leave the IDAC space?
Look, from where I sit and from what we see at the investigations team, when you deal with these sort of complicated crimes, we need someone as national director who is unafraid unafraid to prosecute, who is unafraid to take cases to court, who is unafraid to push the boundaries and really challenge the power structures that were established under state capture. And I think Andrea Johnson, as head of IDAC, has done that. As I said earlier, and often when you speak to our readers and members of the public, there is real and understandable frustration that we have not seen enough prosecutions emanating from the state capture era. But we should also look at the facts. This year we've seen Brian Molefe, Siyabonga Gama, Ace Magashule, Vincent Smith, and latterly Malusi Gigaba appear in court linked to corruption, fraud,
100%.
and theft relating to the state capture era. Now, those are complicated financial crimes. They're all on trial in the High Court. That's a good thing. As you and I sit here, Jacob Zuma is back in the Pietermaritzburg High Court, where the NPA will now bring an application to force the trial to go ahead.
So to stop the Stalingrad tactics.
To stop the Stalingrad tactics and to tell the court, look, Mr. Zuma can go on with whatever he wants, but we need to proceed with trial now. So there is a strong push in the NPA, specifically from IDAC, to prosecute these high-profile, financially complicated fraud and corruption cases. So it is happening. To get back to your original question, I think Andrea Johnson is the right person for the job. I hope she gets it. I think she's the person you need. She needs a strong leadership collective around her to push forward many of these cases. And I think she's going for her. The interviews are being conducted next week across 2 days. I think the 9th and the 10th of December. I think of all of those candidates, in my experience, she would be the best. And then it would obviously be crucial that she appoints someone as her successor at IDAC that can continue her work. But I think as head of the NPA, she'll have a very strong hand about what happens at IDAC.
I'm sure you've been keeping a close eye on it as well. Colleague Ivan Pierce has done an absolutely stellar job about the MKP Russia deployment saga. The MK party came out at that press conference with the resignation of Zuma Sambudla. And basically they're like, we're innocent. We didn't know about this whole operation, la-da-da-da-da. It's really flying in the face of the family's experiences and the men's experiences on the front lines of the Donbas region. Yeah. But it really also feels at the same time how Zuma has been trying to create this sort of strongman force or cabal around him, harking back to his Zuma administration years. Yeah. Just your take, Pieter.
Look, Graeme, I think we need to pay serious attention to what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal. I think the fact that MK members / paramilitary operatives were sent to Russia for a form of training is something that should be deeply concerning. We know that Jacob Zuma is someone that is not averse to stoking tensions in KwaZulu-Natal, violence. We know Sambudla Zuma is on trial for incitement in Durban. So I think we could laugh at this, but I think it's pretty serious. I would not put it beyond Jacob Zuma to start agitating in and around Nkandla and areas like that, using MK members, former members of the actual Umkhonto we Sizwe, to start forming a form of a guard around him, a form of a paramilitary force.
I was about to say, yeah.
I think we need to take note of that. And I think there is something pretty sinister in sending a number of MK members to Russia for training. Whatever bullshit scheme Duduzile Sambudla Zuma cooked up to get them there, if you read the WhatsApp messages that we published today, there's something afoot there. There's a history of violence in KwaZulu-Natal. Zuma has a history of mustering impies around him. I think it's something we need to take note of and look at very seriously.
What do you want for Christmas?
I would have loved to have proper test cricket for Christmas, but that's not going to happen, Graeme. But given where we are now, I just like some blazing hot sunlight in Joburg. But I'd like a new Bluetooth speaker, thanks.
Okay, lekker. And then lastly, Dark Prince, how's your book doing? It's details and chronicles basically the rise of Paul Mashatile, our deputy president, and what the potentialities are of him potentially helming Africa's oldest liberation movement in its dying days.
It's funny you should say that. I just got a message from my colleague Kyle Cowan saying that the book has been cited in court papers now lodged at the High Court by the EFF, where they want to challenge legislation which governs the involvement of family in the awarding of the lotto license. Of course, reporting earlier that there is family of Paul Mashatile involved with a company that has now been given the license. So
I think Amabungane initially
they started with that. So the Dark Prince has now been cited in the EFF's court papers as an example of how the Mashatile networks work. Now, look, the book is doing well, Graeme. Thanks. I'm very, very happy with the way it's been going. The purpose of the book is to warn South Africans that we might be sitting with a Zuma 2.0. I do firmly believe, and I argue in the book, that should Paul Mashatile come anywhere close to the presidency, we will see the same culture of extraction, the same culture of patronage that we saw emerging under Jacob Zuma, simply being transplanted back into the president's office at the Union Buildings. I hope the message hits home.
Yeah, I just wanted your quick thought on this as we end off. And what I felt very interestingly about the book launch in Cape Town, how you mentioned Mashatile throughout his long tenure in the public office space, he hasn't really left behind any major infrastructure or policy plans or projects that really has his stamp of approval on it.
Yeah. Look, I think when I did research for the book, you obviously do it on a couple of tracks. One is his personal development. Second is the networks of influence and patronage that emerged around him. But what I wanted to do in the book as well was to look at his record in governance as an elected official, as an MEC in Gauteng, later as a nominal member of cabinet, first as a deputy minister and then as a full minister, and then his return to Gauteng as well. And I tried to go and investigate and determine what his achievements as an elected official was or were. Were there any major or significant policy positions or signature policy decisions that he made that you could see that's Mashatile? There's nothing like that. The only one that I think could have been something was the Alexandra Renewal Project. Alexandra, of course, the township across the Yixkai River from Sandton, which really, if you ever take the Gautrain from Tambo to Sandton or vice versa, you go across the Yixkai River and then and then the train takes you through Alex. It really is a township where squalor is at the order of the day. And Mashatile had the opportunity through the Alexandra Renewal Project, where he had access to billions of rands to renew and rebuild Alex, as it is affectionately known. He was unable to do that. That was really, I thought, an opportunity for him to build something that he could claim as his own. He was unable to do that. So no, Graeme, as it's terrible. It's terrible promotional work for the book, but Mashatile does not carry a signature or a major or a significant policy achievement or position that you can say that's what he'll do when he gets into power.
Yeah, it's on my Christmas reading list. Where can we get Dark Prince, Pieter du Toit?
It's at all good bookstores, Graeme. It's at all good bookstores, and I'll take a lot as well. And look, rather read Dion Meyer over December. I think that book might do a little bit better. But look, I think the purpose of the book is to provide a roadmap and to provide some insight into what South Africa might look like under the Mashatile presidency. And of course, next year is the build-up to the ANC's elective conference, so it might be relevant.
Yeah. Do we take note at the National General Council meeting?
We absolutely do. The National General Council historically has been the starting point for any ANC leadership contest. In 2005, famously, it was the gathering where, after Jacob Zuma was fired by Thabo Mbeki, where Jacob Zuma mustered support and where it became clear to Thabo Mbeki that he won't be able to remove Zuma as the ANC's deputy leader, and where the Zuma campaign really started. 2016, I think it was, the starting gun for the race between Cyril Ramaphosa and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. So we need to take cognizance of this. We need to see whether or not there will be significant voices speaking out against Cyril Ramaphosa. I doubt it. I think Cyril Ramaphosa's tenure will now come to its natural conclusion. But
Touch wood.
let's see what happens. There will be some dissenting voices. So certainly the NGC is a gathering that we need to follow closely.
That's our absolutely excellent investigations editor, Pieter du Toit, making time for us on the lead today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Graeme. Always good.
At 10x Investments, we don't only help you invest for retirement, we help you craft a legacy. With thoughtful planning and meticulous execution, you can create the retirement future you've always wanted. Invest with us today. 10x your future. 10x is a licensed FSB.
And finally,
So sorry, lead listeners, for the frog in my throat over the last 2 editions. I'm sure by Monday it'll all be resolved. But on this day in South African history, the 4th of December 1809, Cape Town had experienced the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in the region. The quake measured an estimated 6.5 on the Richter scale and was triggered by movement along the Milnerton Fault. It's a geological fault line that runs beneath the Milnerton suburb, across the Cape Flats and towards the CBD. Now, at that time, Cape Town was still a small settlement with limited infrastructure and a much smaller population. So as a result, the damage was relatively contained. Historical accounts describe cracks and fissures opening in the ground and buildings shaking violently, but widespread destruction was avoided largely because there were few large structures to be damaged. Modern seismologists warned, though, that a quake of similar magnitude today would pose a far greater threat. Cape Town is now densely populated with extensive residential, commercial and industrial development built directly above or near the ancient fault line. The 1809 event remains an important reminder of these risks that still exist beneath the city, and it underscores the need for disaster readiness in an area not often associated with quakes, now is it? What a news week it's been. It's been an absolute privilege to come up to the Randburg studios to take some of these shows live here. I've been up and down Gauteng, busy with a very interesting special assignment that we hope to release early next year. Watch the space. In the meantime, you can drop us all of your mails, thelead@24.com. I check that mailbox daily, or 072-562-3179 for all of your voice notes on WhatsApp. Hit like, follow and subscribe. That way you'll be notified of our next edition. We're running up until Christmas, so expect fresh editions over the next few weeks. My name's Graeme Robenheimer. So long as there's trusted news first, we'll always have The Lead on News 24. This episode of The Lead was brought to you by 10x Investments. 10x your future.